Welcome back. Today I'm with Roger Levitt. Roger is ranked as a leading mediator by Legal 500, having conducted 160 commercial and property mediations, online and face-to-face. He's a fellow of the Civil Mediation Council and chair of its Complaints and Discipline Committee, and a member of the CMC Board and Registration and Standards Committee. Roger provides mentoring services to newly qualified mediators. He acts as an assessor for mediation training courses. He qualified as a property solicitor in my favourite year of all, 1984, and since then has been a solicitor and is now non-practicing. He holds 2 non-exec roles, and sadly he supports Spurs, which did make me think twice about inviting him on today. What you can't see is I'm wearing a Liverpool shirt. Roger, welcome.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Yeah, we've always had a healthy debate about football and Liverpool and Spurs.
Yeah, I think we've always been fair as well, because sometimes, even the healthy debate, people can get a little bit nasty when one team wins and the other loses. But I think we've managed to be pretty fair over the years.
Yeah, like true mediators.
Yeah. So how are you doing?
Yeah, doing really well, thanks. Feeling fit. Just come back in from the gym actually, so I'm still glowing.
Well, put me to shame. Is this the gym a regular thing?
Yeah, it's something that Abby, my wife, and I do together. We got a trainer, and to get up and get out by 7:30 in the morning sometimes is a challenge, but it's always worth it. And then the rest of the day somehow seems a little bit easier.
Yeah, I must admit, when my kids all left and went to uni and stuff, I thought, right, I'll have some lions now. But my eldest son Rob, he's home after uni, and he goes into London sometimes once a week, but like this week it's been 3 times so far this week. And he seems to think that Dad's taxi service should mean I get up at 7 o'clock and take him to the train station. But what I find actually on those days, I take him to the station. I'm not as active as you in terms of exercise, but I take him to the station at 7. I go to my local coffee shop and I do a couple of hours work before 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And that sort of frees up a lot of time during the day to do things like this, which would be hard to fit in to a normal working day. But actually, by starting early, it's so much done in that couple of hours, completely uninterrupted, apart from the lovely staff bringing me another cup of coffee. And it's warm, which it isn't at home, because obviously I'm not putting my heating on. And it's just a great way to start the day. So I'm all for that. And maybe I should try and fit a dog walk in as well to get some exercise early on as well, to counteract all the coffee.
Yeah, well, it's all thanks to Rob. So
yeah. Well, he gave us sleepless nights as a child, and now he's given us early mornings as an adult. So not much change there. I think you've met Rob, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Yeah. Was it? We were doing a food bank collection, weren't we?
Yeah.
In the IDRC. Yeah.
He's growing up and doing well. So good.
Yeah. I think that was actually possibly. Well, it was definitely before COVID. So quite possibly before he went to uni. So a few years ago now. I'm trying to think about when we actually met. It was for the first time. I mean, it must be 10 years plus, but I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, it's a good question actually. Things tend to disappear in the mists of time, but
on a previous episode, I was talking to James Walker, who is the person who came up with the idea for Resolver and dealing with consumer complaints online. And it was really easy to remember when we first met, because it was the day the Olympic parade was taking place in London after the Beijing Olympics. And so it was a nice, easy one, but I can't remember exactly when we met. But I reckon it was when I was at sea there. So
Yeah.
2008 onwards. So probably, we've probably known each other 10 or 12 years, I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great community, the mediation world. I really enjoy it. It's compared with my previous community of principally property solicitors.
Mm.
I think there is something special about the world of mediation and the way that people who are all like-minded get together and exchange ideas and support each other. And in many cases we're in direct competition, but it doesn't seem to hinder the relationships.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things, you mentioned about property solicitors, and it could be any branch of any profession. When you mix with the same people who are doing the same sort of job, in a particular specialism, it's limited often to talking about that particular specialism, property
Mm-hmm.
law. Whereas in mediation and arbitration and the ADR sector as a whole, we all come from different backgrounds, and actually we're all dealing with different types of disputes. So you don't get put down the line of only having a conversation about one area. You can have a conversation, in one meeting, you can speak to a mediator who does sport, music, property, construction, professional negligence, clinical negligence. It could be all sorts of different things. So the potential for having an interesting conversation is vastly increased, I think, because of the different types of work that we all do, even though we just call it mediation.
Yeah, exactly. And if we are civil and commercial mediators, and I put workplace in the same category for these purposes, we're looking at a similar approach to the way that we resolve disputes, but bearing in mind that we've all got different styles and different characters, but we've got that one thing in common, is that we're trying to help people to resolve disputes so that they can move on.
Yeah, definitely. So, talking of moving on, I've got a couple of sort of questions or topics really I'd like to know your opinion on, and I'm sure listeners would like to know your opinion on. And one of the things that I think gets overlooked in some mediator training programs, and I know on my course I deal with it, but I know from people it's not always dealt with in great deal elsewhere, is mediation preparation, and how a mediator prepares for the mediation in the first place. Do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, I mean those people who have heard me talk about this in the past will know it's a favorite topic of mine, because I think that, as you said, it often isn't given enough attention. It's I'd say in the ideal world, I would get 2+ weeks of notice of a mediation. Now, of course, that isn't always possible, but I'm looking here at discussing what the ideal position is, which enables me to get in touch with the parties for an initial chat, with a view to setting up a pre-mediation Zoom with each party and their advisors. And they and I get so much out of that preparation, because it's coupled with a briefing note which I send out, which explains how the procedure works, what to expect, what not to expect, all the documentation that I'd like to receive, and I guess in some ways more importantly than that, if it's possible to put this in an order of preference, to get people thinking in the right frame of mind, with the right attitude, with the right approach, to coming prepared towards settling the dispute, as opposed to getting ready for a mini trial, which of course the mediation isn't. But
do you ever find that people, well, how do you deal with it when people maybe try and mediate in the pre-mediation call?
well, because I do separate calls with each side and their advisors, we're really in that pre-mediation call looking at preparing the ground for the mediation meeting itself, trying to get them in the right frame of mind, looking at the documentation as well if that's already been supplied, and so helping them to work out a plan coming into the mediation, as opposed to an approach which might say, we'll just sort it out on the day. And so I think in some ways it's almost difficult to not to over prepare, because you the more that they're thinking about preparing for a settlement, the more that they're thinking about how they can stretch themselves beyond their comfort zone, then the more likely it is, of course, that there'll be a settlement on the day. If they come prepared only to negotiate on their own terms, then it doesn't work. I think you have to have that conversation in advance, and it's so much better if it's face to face, even if it's face to face over Zoom.
It's really interesting, because I think it's one of those areas that many mediators do that call, many don't, and I think the content of it varies massively as well. I mean, for me, it's that initial sort of pre-mediation call is, and this comes down to how you mediate and personalities and all the rest of it. I think for me, that call is just about them hearing my voice, asking me any questions they've got about the mediation process, and not starting to look at the dispute at all. But it's just that first step in building some rapport. So on the day of the mediation, they've already met me. It might be a phone call, but these days tends to be a Zoom. So we've already met in some way. And that initial fear from all parties, because everyone involved in the mediation, including the mediator, has some nerves going into the mediation, has been alleviated a bit. And so I think what I do is a lot less involved than what you do. But it doesn't mean either of them are right or wrong. And that's one of the things about mediation, I think, is the flexibility and the different personalities the different mediators bring to the mediation mean that there can't be just one fixed way of doing it.
Absolutely. I mean, we're I suppose I'm grappling with this as well in one of my other roles, which we might get on to talk about through the CMC, and with my wearing my hat of being the chair of the Complaints and Disciplinary Committee. I see obviously the worst cases, the worst situations. Thankfully, there aren't so many. There may be 4 to 6 a year, but nevertheless, when I was first invited to take on that role, I thought, oh no, like the shortest of the short straws. But then as I got into it, I realized how challenging and interesting a role it is, because what we're trying to do is to at the same time deal with the specific complaint and with the benefit of independent investigators' input to make a judgment on what needs to be done in each particular case. But then at the same time look at the learnings, and there is so much to get out of each case that we all never stop learning, of course, but it's how do you translate that into recommendations for how we should run mediations without being completely prescriptive, because as you said, every mediator is different, their approach is different, their characters are different, and the last thing we want to do is be overly prescriptive. But of course, also sitting behind that is the concern that we have to be able to be seen to be regulating ourselves properly, so that we fend off any moves from the Ministry of Justice to create an MRA like the SRA. That's, for those who don't know, the SRA is the Solicitors Regulation Authority. And having grown up in the legal world and seen that created and developed, it's something that we would absolutely want to avoid if at all possible. So
do you think, when on the complaint side, we might as well stick with this for a bit, do you find that it's like when I deal, Hunt ADR deals with travel disputes, as you know, and we find that a lot of the problems, by the time they get to us, still relate to the initial problem that someone felt that they had on the holiday, but actually is compounded by the fact that they've complained and not got a reply, and they've complained again and still not got a reply, and it could be a year later by the time they come to us. And actually the complaint sometimes is more about the fact that they didn't get a reply, or a suitable reply, rather than what happened in the first place. Do you find that's the case in your CMC role, or is it very much about the what the mediator did on the day, and that is the actual core issue that needs addressing?
Well, it's a very good point, because I think that perhaps 99.99% of the complaints are as a result of no communication, or miscommunication, or assumptions made because there wasn't a communication. And so if that communications line is improved through, however we best prepare for a case, I think that would do away with probably most of the complaints, because the complaints that we've seen often turn around the participants not understanding how the process works. Well, that's because it hasn't been explained to them properly.
Which is a fundamental issue.
It's so basic, but if the preparation is full, the documentation is clear, so that's both whatever type of pre-mediation documentation the mediator likes to use, as well as the mediation agreement, then you're going to get rid of so many complaints, because it's all there in the documents.
And why do you think it is that? I mean, I'm presumably not every complaint that you deal with is something that's upheld anyway. There must be cases where the mediator's actually got a suitable defense in effect, and complaint moves away. But in those cases, the 99.9% where it's about communication, is there any trend that shows that the communication issues are more common, maybe in more established mediators, or mediators who've been qualified for longer? Or is it that it's normally with newer mediators who maybe are inexperienced, or is there no trend at all in that way?
Well, that's an interesting question, because we've had a broad range of qualification levels of mediators who've been complained against. So I would say that if it's a very experienced mediator who clearly knows how to deal with a mediation, they've done this hundreds of times, and they've got the experience to in some cases just pick things up very quickly. If they've got instructions for several mediations in a week. But it maybe it's just that the process isn't thorough and clear enough.
Changing a little bit there, I think, and just something you said there, I'd be interested in your opinion on. You said about mediators doing several mediations in a week. What's your view on that?
It's something which I've considered right from the word go when I qualified, and I looked up at the what I call the pioneer mediators. Some are probably coming up to 30 years of mediation. I still believe that it's the limit I would put on it is 2 a week.
Yeah.
In my opinion, for me, because of the way I prepare, I don't think that I'm comfortable dealing with more than 2 a week at any time.
Yeah.
And that would also mean that, again, ideally they're not on consecutive days.
Yeah.
Because some days, as you know, you have a mediation that really takes it out of you.
Yeah.
And you need a day just to chill.
Yeah, absolutely. All that day in between might be preparing for one the next day, so 2 days later. But I mean, over the years I've heard some horror stories of people doing too many mediations in a week. Not sort of even not remembering which mediation they're in at the time can be an issue. And I did hear once about a mediator who was doing 2 on the same day, and the parties found
simultaneously.
Yeah. Horrific. But I mean, I agree with you. I think 2 in a week would be nice, to be honest. I think I've only ever done 2 in a week once. But I think 2 in a week would be, because unless you're a full-time mediator as well, and there are very few absolute hand on heart can say all I do is mediate. Very few people. Then most mediators who are doing multiple cases in a week are also doing a job. And that might be their own business, or it might be in a firm or something. So I just I think for me 2 in a week is probably more than enough. I remember a case where someone didn't finish until 5 a.m. and then they were starting the next mediation the next day at 9 a.m. and it's that might be few and far between, but it happened. And the parties on day 2 aren't getting a good service because the mediators not even had 4 hours sleep because they had to get home and then go to wherever the next mediation was. But also the parties on the first mediation, because the mediator must have been getting stressed about the time and thinking, oh my God, I've got to get some sleep. I've got another one in the morning. So I'm not a fan of consecutive day mediations or more than 2 a week. But as I say, it would be a nice problem to have.
Well, as it happens, I've got 2 next week. One on Wednesday, one on the Friday, and then I've got one on the following Wednesday. And preparing for 3 at the same time is just about, I reckon, the maximum. I just think it's, there are obviously some cases where you're told by a mediation provider that this is take it or leave it. It's got to be that date. But in most cases, you do have a choice. And so I think in those cases, you say, I'd like to delay it by 2 or 3 days. And most people would go with that if they want you to mediate their case.
Have you ever turned down a mediation, either because of the timing or because, I suppose more importantly, because you've not felt that you're the right mediator for it?
I actually can't think of an example, because if it comes from a panel, they know you, so they wouldn't put you forward if they thought it was not appropriate.
It's happened to me once. I
Yeah.
got offered a mediation once by a provider, and it was, I can't remember the full details, but I think it was sort of family related and included some specific family law. And I said, this just isn't for me. It's just, and I was a little bit annoyed that I'd been put forward for it, because when I saw I'd been nominated, I'd not had one off this provider before. The fee looked fantastic. And I thought, great, brilliant. And then I looked at the papers and I was like, why have you given this to me? And I did turn it down, because I think it's important. If you're the mediator, you can handle an awful lot, but if there's something that is really, really out of your comfort zone, then don't take it.
Yeah, I I agree with you on that topic, exactly, because I would say the same. Family and childcare is a very specialised area, and one that I wouldn't take.
Yeah. So before we move on to something which is very prevalent, have you got anything else you want to add on the complaint side?
I think we probably covered everything. I think that I suppose the only additional thing I would say that we haven't talked about is, as a mediator, how you deal with a complaint against you, because you'll obviously have your own complaints procedure, but let's assume that that doesn't resolve it, and it's not an absolute assumption, because most cases can be resolved by discussion with the participants. But let's say it doesn't get resolved, and then it goes to the CMC for an independent investigator to look at. You should hold your hands up as early as possible if there's been a mistake.
Yeah.
That you in your heart of hearts that you could have done it differently, or should have done it differently. But at all costs, don't dig yourself in deeper.
Yeah.
And I have seen situations there where I can think of a particular case where the complainant gave the mediator 2 opportunities to do just that, to hold their hands up, and apologize, and they weren't after compensation. They just wanted an acknowledgement that something was done incorrectly. And we're all human, we all make mistakes, and in that situation, just hold your hands up early and cooperate.
And acknowledge if you've made a mistake or not done something. Can avoid the whole thing. I mean, I've got a complaint against something at the moment, and it goes down again to communication, like you said earlier about how a mediator communicates at preparation, also communication later on in the process. And if you get a response to your complaint that is rude, rushed, and leaves you thinking, well, this person doesn't actually really care, and they've not addressed my points, they're just being sarcastic or whatever, then that's not dealing with a complaint, and that will just lead to more anger and frustration from the person who's making the complaint, who then maybe will want to escalate the complaint. which could have just been dealt with quite easily in the first instance. So it's interesting. Maybe there needs to be some sort of I wouldn't call it a training program, because it's maybe a bit condescending to say that for professionals who maybe just need to be aware of how to deal with complaints properly and quickly.
Yeah, well, it should be part of the training, like like preparation should be. It's a hugely important part of the whole process. And if the communication isn't proper and thorough, and that leads to a complaint, you still, as a mediator, you still got to know how to deal with the complaint properly.
You know what, Roger? I am going to take away from this. I'm going to add how to deal with complaints to our training course, because we don't currently. I'll be honest with you. It's not in there. But I'm gonna add. It might be half an hour. Late on in the thing. Once you've qualified, once you've had your assessment back, and you're approved by whatever body it is, then you may mediate and you may get a complaint. So this is how to deal with it.
There you go.
Yeah, excellent. I'm going to put that in. Now, one thing that might lead to more complaints could be the introduction of mandatory mediation. So I'd be really interested, actually. I've asked a few people this, and I've got my own views, some of which I've already expressed in previous episodes. But what's your view on mandatory mediation?
Well, firstly, it's coming over the horizon, the close horizon. The MOJ proposal that went out for consultation is involving all cases under £10,000 being subject to compulsory mediation, and also to have an hour's worth of what they term mediation, but we know it's not mediation. But that would be included at the cost of the state. And at last week's Civil Mediation Council annual conference, Lord Bellamy spoke about his thoughts on what's going to be happening. He didn't really give too much away, but what he did say was, firstly, that the proposal he thinks is highly likely to be implemented. He didn't give a date, so we're just sitting waiting for that. And he also said that he was against an MRA type regulation body, which is good to hear. But I guess also it's possible that, like all the other people at the MOJ, he gets moved on. Maybe he gets moved on. Because he doesn't seem to stay in post for too long. But anyway, as it is, that's his view. What do I think about it? I think that because it's going to be coming on cases up to £10,000, that inevitably it will spread upwards in value. And then the question is, what exact form compulsion will take. At the CMC, we've long said that we think there should be an automatic referral to mediation. So it's something that we have been calling for and expect. But the devil's always in the detail, and it depends on exactly how the case is referred to mediation and when. So I've long had a view that there should be a more robust pre-action protocol that sifts out cases that really should be mediated. And because going to court is the last resort, it's not sufficient just to tick a box and say, we've discussed this, we've tried to settle this. If there was more detailed inquiries made about exactly what discussions, what meetings, whether mediation had been offered and refused, and if so, why, and I think that would mean that more cases wouldn't get to the issues stage. But if they do, if they still get past those obstacles and a claim is issued, then would it automatically mean that at the first hearing that the judge would then automatically stay for 2 or 3 months and say, go away and mediate this? And would that be what in practice would happen? I think the other main issue in my mind about compulsory mediation is what actually sorry, not what, but how the cases are divided up between court-appointed mediators and mediators who work in the private sector. Because Lord Bellamy made a couple of comments about this, but it really was no more than he thinks that it's a good idea that the private sector should be involved, but to what extent? So if you look at the number of cases at the moment that would come within that £10,000 bracket, I think the figure that's been bandied about is about 10,000.
Yeah.
And I think the number of MOJ staff employed at the moment to deal with those types of cases is something like 30 or 40.
Yeah.
Which clearly is not, it's not nowhere near enough. So if these were sent, or some of them were sent to the private sector, then that's obviously good for the mediation world. And if we're making the assumption that the next stage would be cases above 10,000 to let's say 100,000, then we're looking at an awful lot more work for more mediators.
Yeah.
So I think it's it's not if but when. And it's happening. So we need to make sure that we can prepare for it as well as we can in conjunction with the MOJ.
Any sort of sense of when it might happen?
No. Lord Bellamy didn't give us any clues. He said it was happening, but no, when the MOJ are ready, it'll happen.
I just hope it's resourced properly, and which obviously it won't be.
It won't be. It won't be.
I hope it's resourced properly, and I hope that it's given a long enough lead-in time to be done properly. And sort of experience makes me feel that neither of those things will happen when it comes to it.
Yeah, I suppose my gut feeling is it will be happening in the next 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah, that's my gut.
Well, it will go live within the next 6 months, or it will be announced that it's going to happen.
I think they'll announce it. I think at the moment they're going through all the representations that were made to them, and I think I recall that the cutoff was in October. So they could justify, say, taking 3 or 4 months to go through the representations and formulate a view. I think it's also worth pointing out in my view, we've got compulsory mediation in all but name, because we know that because the courts are so overloaded and the judiciary are now much more attuned to mediation and are directing mediation much earlier and much more regularly. And I think also in my experience, the approach of the dispute resolution solicitors is now much more mediation friendly.
Yeah.
They see it as, they don't see it as an enemy. It's part of their toolkit. And so consequently, I reckon that half the cases that I mediate are pre-issue, which is great from the client's point of view, cost-wise. In some cases, I don't know whether you've had this, but the mediation is based around draft particulars of claim and draft defence. And it just makes so much more sense for how as a dispute resolution solicitor you're going to retain a happy client. Is find a way of resolving the case effectively sooner rather than later.
Yeah, there's absolutely no doubt in my mind, as I know in yours, that mediation can be a significant answer to the problems faced by parties going to court. It's just the implementation I'm concerned about. But there's a lot of people, ourselves included, who will be more than happy to help. And I think that's a good thing. It's not as if when the time comes, there's going to be, in effect, a new opportunity created and no one prepared to take it. I think there's going to be a lot of people prepared to help, and a lot of people prepared to mediate and see how it goes. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll be a great success. So we're running out of time, I think, because I know that you need to get a train at some point. Best of luck with that. Away from the job, we know you sort of are a bit of a masochist and you support Tottenham, and that keeps you well grounded. And that you go to the gym. Have you got any other sort of interests, things that you do to give yourself some downtime away from work?
Well, my biggest passion is my family. Having brought up 3 children with Abby, my wife, to the point where they're now in their early 30s in the oldest case, and the other 2 are just coming up to 30. It's as you know only too well, it's a fantastic project which is ongoing. And so that's number one. Number two is, I think, eating and traveling well, which is something that we get to do a little bit more of now that the kids are older. And keeping fit. I've played 11-a-side football all my life up until a few years ago, when it just got a little bit too much. And so I now play walking football.
Oh yeah.
Which is great, really great fun, and it's a really good workout as well.
Yeah, I tried that actually. I found that I was the youngest there, which was unusual, because I think it was from 50 plus, and when I hit 50, I went. It was just before COVID, so I haven't picked it up again since COVID. But I really enjoyed it. But I actually found that because I did my cruciate ligament when I was 21, in the days when that was it, you know, there was no. I had surgery and like years later and stuff, and I can do a lot more now. But in terms of playing football, my football playing days ended at 21. And even at walking football, I found it was a bit, well, everybody, absolutely everybody there had played football their whole life. So I was going as someone who last played football at 21.
Yeah.
And it was just really hard to sort of get into it because everyone else was so, like, sort of had been playing football for 40 years in the time when I'd not properly
Yeah.
kicked the ball apart from playing with the kids. And yeah, so even walking football, I enjoyed it, but I didn't really enjoy the atmosphere, I suppose, because I wasn't used to being in that sort of environment, I think.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's interesting because actually I found um, being a little bit older than you, the guys are all in their 60s and 70s,
Mm.
and it's like finding a group of rejuvenated kids. You know?
Yeah, yeah. I can see, I
Yeah,
can thoroughly understand how you would find that if you've been playing football your whole life. But for someone who came back to it after 30 years of not being involved in that sort of stuff, it was quite hard to get back into. I also really got wound up by the people who sort of ran. It was supposed to be walking football, and
yeah,
there was one fella who was probably about 60, and most of the players in his team were, pushing 70.
yeah.
And he was just basically running with the ball, and the whole game was like, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to do that. So yeah,
Did you not have referees? Was it?
yeah, but I think it was his mate.
Uh,
But I
yeah,
might
the
give it another
referees.
go. I might give it another go in 10
Yeah.
years. Yeah, let's see, in 10 years.
Yeah,
So that's good to know. And I think what you say about family is so important. And as a parent, we do have quite a few young listeners to this podcast. There's probably about 10% of the people who listen are under 25.
mm,
And I think one thing, when you have children, it's a constant journey, isn't it? And the
yeah,
things that you do, I've always loved doing stuff with the kids, and time's been limited at different times. And now they're all adults, a bit younger than yours, 22, and I've got 18-year-old twins. I still love doing all the stuff, but love doing it with them as adults.
yeah.
It's so different, and sort of learning to get to know them as the people that they're developing into and becoming as adults is fascinating. And like, I know when we've spoken before, you can feel a huge sense of pride in how your babies have turned into adults.
Yeah, and I think bringing this back to the mediation world, I think one of the most satisfying things I've had as a parent is seeing my children develop from when I started mediation. They were all three in their mid-teens, and they were at their horriblest.
Mm.
And as time has gone by, and we've had conversations about things that I've picked up from mediations, and they're now adult mediators with their
Yeah,
boys.
yeah.
They instinctively know how to handle disputes and disagreements, and it's just fantastic. And I know, we have peer mediation programs which are brilliant,
Mm.
starting with children even younger. But to enable children at as early a possible age to be able to understand how to deal with disputes and
Mm.
differences of opinion, because we were never taught that.
Yeah, yeah. No, it is really important. And still something missing. I do Ulster University. I teach on the mediation course as part of the international law
Mm,
postgraduate course. And we go over for a week, and we train about 20 law students to be mediators, and they're brilliant. The
mm,
vast majority of them are absolutely fantastic.
yeah.
And it's great now, because I know we're not the only ones who do that at universities. There are many others who do as well.
Mm,
And it's great now that the future is being taught mediation
mm.
at a relatively early age. And one thing that maybe mandatory mediation will do is give some of these people an opportunity to actually do some mediation work while they're still relatively young, to get them into a position when they're older, when they're going to be really good, experienced mediators.
Yeah, and I suppose it has occurred to me on several occasions that the better they're taught, the less work there would be for mediators.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's always the thing, isn't it? As a mediation training provider, and as a mediator, there's a conflict because you're training your competition. And if you train them well, you're actually really creating competition. And I've seen that a few of the people that we've trained over the years have really taken it on. And one of the people on one of my earlier podcasts was Craig Johnson, and he's actually set up his own ADR business now and is doing very well. And every time I see him on LinkedIn or I speak to him, I say, how many more cases have you taken off me now? It's like,
yeah.
So it is one of those sort of situations. But I think morally, it's still a good thing to do, because not everyone who trains to be a mediator wants to be a mediator.
Yeah.
Some of them are in businesses and they've recognized the good skills to have. Others are going to be representing parties in mediation and want to know more about what the mediator might be thinking and what makes it tick and what the process is. Some of them do it for educational reasons, and others do it to give them a USP. If you're going for a job and the other person isn't an accredited mediator and you are, it gives you something else that maybe someone else hasn't got. But I think that at the moment outweighs any fear of creating competition for me. But maybe at some point I'll have to change my mind on that.
Yeah,
Roger, sorry.
No, they don't have your experience, though. That's the thing.
No, maybe not.
Yeah.
But I do, and I know you're the same because you do coaching and mentoring. I think I don't mind people learning from my. It's one of the reasons I do this, I think, is I want people who maybe don't know much about mediation to learn about it and actually think, oh, that's something that I'd like to do. Because the more people who know about it, the more people will then ultimately use it. And I think it's up to us more experienced people to give some of that experience to other people.
Yeah.
Okay, Roger, would you like to give me and any listeners, not me because I know, any listeners an email address, maybe a way to contact you if they want to know more from you?
Yeah, with pleasure. It's Roger, that's ROGER, at Roger Levitt, LEVITT, mediation.co.uk.
Lovely. And all I've got to say then is thank you very much to Roger for being my guest today. And I will see you all next time on No Disputing That.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to No Disputing That. Please subscribe to hear more from experts in the field. If you'd like to suggest any future areas for discussion or to appear on the show yourself, you can follow us on Twitter at No Disputing That and send us a DM. Finally, if you need a mediator, give my management team at Arbitra International a call on 020 7936 7070 or email info@arbitra.co.uk. See you next time on No Disputing That.